Oh, wow, a big friend is coming up. A friend to this festival. The moment he first stepped onto this festival stage, he was everyone's best friend. Today, he is dressed in his finest duds. He is often dressed in different kinds of duds. And in fact, tomorrow afternoon at the International Storytelling Center's Story Theater, you can buy a ticket and go in and hear Ed Stivender, always a joy in himself, interview Tim Lowry on how he puts together his shows and all the big traditional shows like the Chautauquas and the circuses and all that traveled around this country that inspired the work that he does today. He doesn't only do it here, he does it all over the country, including in schools where one school teacher said to him, "We have never had a rush on books in the library about the Revolutionary War before you came to our school." That shows you how powerful he is. Now, I asked him, of course, when I saw Tim Lowry last night, "Can I get your new CD?" He said, "Well, we had to evacuate." From Summerville, South Carolina, Tim and his family, he didn't have time to put the finishing touch on his new CD, so they had to evacuate their home, but fortunately they had a lovely place to come, right, with lots of friendly faces. So you can get what's over there at the center, but also go to www.storywillageusa.com to get his newest. Also, you can see him on YouTube, and Aki has more poetry there too. Okay, now I'm blathering because I want him to come up here. Please welcome our new great friend from several years ago and still counting, Tim Lowry. Happy trails, Tim.
All right, y'all. I got them CDs. When we evacuated, we took the family silver, great-grandpa's release papers from a Yankee prison, and the dog, and lots of new CDs. Yeah, so there are 2 new titles up in the resource tent. The website, storywillageusa.com, that's delayed due to the hurricane. You know, it messes up the Wi-Fi. So we're fine. So if you want CDs, go get them. They're up there. And I would like to add my congratulations to Aki's premiere here at the National Storytelling Festival. I was saying the only thing that I know how to say, dang. There was a day when I was as skinny as you, as passionate as you, as young as you. This is what you have to look forward to. Now, I know you're accustomed to seeing me in a seersucker suit, and I do feel like a fish out of water or a cowboy in the East, you might say. But there's a reason for this get-up. This past summer, I went to the Great American West. I had a gig in Salt Lake City, Utah, and then 3 days later, I had a week's worth of work in Omaha, Nebraska. Give it up to Omaha, Nebraska, right there. Very good. Welcome. Nice to see you. The rest of my state is in your backyard right now while we wait the hurricane out. Well, I didn't want to fly home to fly back to the West, so I thought I'll rent a car and drive 20 hours across the Great American West. And it was fabulous. When I went to the car rental place in Salt Lake, I wanted a Ford Bronco. I thought that's just what you have to have when you're driving across the American West, and they gave me a Kia. So I headed out from Salt Lake in my Kia, and I went across high desert. I drove up the Timpanogos Canyon. At the top of the canyon, there's a lake country. I took pictures of the lake, and then I drove out over the high desert of Utah. Tumbleweeds actually rolled in front of me, just like a cowboy movie. After I had driven for 4 or 5 hours, I stopped at the Ute Indian Reservation, saw beautiful beadwork, fabulous, fabulous artwork. Then I got back in the car and I drove a little more and I came to this place called Vernal, Utah, and ate in a cafe, and I said, so what do you have to see around here? And she said, lots of dead stuff. And I said, oh, that's like South Carolina. Yeah. But they don't have dead people. They have dead dinosaurs in Vernal, Utah. I was driving on the Dinosaur Diamond Highway. I have no idea what diamonds had to do with it, but they had all kinds of dinosaur fossils there. In fact, it's one of the largest depositories of dinosaur fossils anywhere on the planet. So you could turn off the main road and drive up these gravel pathways, and literally it was like a pathway. I really wished I had that Ford Bronco. And then you'd find all this dead stuff embedded in the side of a cliff, and there are archaeologists out there, and they offer you a scraper and a sifter and stuff, and you can do that. And I was like, I'm not accustomed to getting dirty. I'm from South Carolina. So I just took pictures and went on my way. And after I'd gone across the high desert of Utah, then I came into Colorado, and everything started to green up and started to rise higher and higher and higher. And I came to this town not far from the Rocky Mountains called Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And Steamboat Springs is here. Very good, very fine. And when I got to Steamboat Springs, I was just feeling the need for a steak. So I went into this steakhouse and I ordered a big steak and a baked potato and a salad, and they brought me a slab of meat, red. Not rare red, raw red. And I said, what is this? And he said, it's a steak. And I said, I know, but I want you to cook it. He said, oh no. He said, this is cook your own. The grill's right over there. I said, I had to educate the people in your neighboring state. I'm from South Carolina. We're very accustomed to being served. Do something with this. So he took me over to the grill and showed me how to cook my steak. And after I had eaten my steak, I got back in the car and I drove up into the Rockies. Spent the night in a little town just at the bottom of the mountain, and then the next morning I drove through Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, my family did not get to come with me. And so when I got way up at 14,000 feet, and I learned if you stood on a crag with your right leg out and your left ear toward the east, you could get cell phone reception. I called my wife and I said, this is really beautiful, but I didn't say anything else because I didn't want her to feel bad that she couldn't come. She said, oh, I know you. What do you see? And I said, I've been crying for 45 minutes. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Oh, my word. It was fabulous. And then I came down out of the Rockies into Estes Park, Colorado, and they were all getting ready for elk rut season. Y'all, that's something you have to brace yourself for. I have never in my life seen stuff like that. This is the family tent, so use your imagination. And then the next day, then that evening, I went over to Golden, and I drove up on Lookout Mountain so that I could visit the grave of Buffalo Bill Cody. And the museum was already closed, but the gift shop was open until sunset because everybody from Denver and Golden goes up there to watch the sunset. Buffalo Bill wanted to be buried on the top of Lookout Mountain because off the west you can see the Great Rockies, and off the east you can see the Great Prairie. He'd had a life of adventure in both places, so he's buried right up there at the top. Now, there's a marker next to him for his wife, but I am not at all convinced that she's actually in there. I think I met her in the gift shop. That gift shop was everything that Buffalo Bill ever was, from tacky t-shirts and bumper stickers to high-end leather jackets. And the lady behind the counter had long iron gray hair, and she said, "Hey, honey, how can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to see the sunset, learn a little bit about Buffalo Bill." And she said, "That suit you're wearing ain't gonna cut it when you're in Colorado." And I said, well, I'm beginning to understand there's a different culture and a different aesthetic out here. And I saw over there in a glass case, you had all those beautiful fringed leather jackets. I knew I was coming here and that Dolly Parton was sponsoring this tent, and you know how she dresses. So I thought, I got to get me a jacket when I go to the National Storytelling Festival and look good. I said, I'm not sure I can even afford one of those fine garments, but may I try some on? She said, honey, I got to go outside and have a smoke. I didn't know she smoked. She said, I got to go outside and smoke. She said, I'll unlock the cabinet. You can just try on anything you want. So I tried on this fabulous leather jacket and strutted all around. Ooh, it looks so good. And then I really couldn't justify spending that kind of money on a jacket. So I thanked her and I hung it back up. And she said, that's all right, honey. We're going to save it for you. And then the next day, I drove across Nebraska to see absolutely nothing. Y'all, I had read about the Great Prairie and Little House on the Prairie. I had never seen it for myself. There's a reason. Oh my word. I'm driving along and there was not a tree in sight. There was not even a cow. I don't know if they put the cows away just for my benefit so that I would have the full experience. There was absolutely nothing. And, you know, here in the East, when you're driving on the interstate, you see those blue signs, and they say gas, and it lists several gas stations. Then the next one says food, and it lists several places that you can eat. McDonald's, Arby's, Burger King. And you pull up the exit ramp, and right there to your left is Arby's, right over there is Burger King. Not in Nebraska. I found one food exit, and I took it. When I got to the top of the ramp, the next sign said McDonald's, 42 miles that way. Arby's, 37 miles that way. I'm sorry I didn't buy that leather jacket so I'd have some fringe to chew on. I finally found a Flying J truck stop, and I swear to you, everybody in the Western world was at the Flying J loading up on supplies because they were all headed either to California or back east to Omaha. Finally, I came into Hastings, Nebraska. Hastings, Nebraska. Now, that was really the only thing that was a must-see on my list. Hastings, Nebraska is the birthplace of Kool-Aid. Yes, indeed. And I live in Summerville, South Carolina. We are the birthplace of sweet tea. And so I had taken on the plane, in the rental car, over the Rockies, and now across the Great Prairie, a basket of sweet tea products from our museum to their museum to celebrate these two birthplaces. Yes, now they were on the opposite side during the war, but now we are united to raise sugar diabetes rates all over the nation. So in my seersucker suit, I marched right in and I presented this basket of sweet tea products from the mayor of Summerville, South Carolina, and they said, thank you very much. And I took a big tour of the Kool-Aid Museum. It was very fine. They even had the suit. You remember when you were a kid and on television they would say, oh yeah, and the Kool-Aid man would bust through all those blocks of ice. I got my picture made with the Kool-Aid suit. It was very exciting. And then I headed off to Omaha. And on my way to Omaha, I stopped for something to eat. And I asked some of the locals, where should I go to eat? And they said, well, if you want to try local food, you should have a runza. And I said, what's a runza? And they said, well, it's a European thing, and the first pioneers to settle this area brought it with them. It's a bun with some cabbage and some meat in it. And I said, do they cook it for you? And they said, well, yeah, they cook it for you. I said, fine, point me to a runza. So I went to this runza restaurant, and I sat down. Since I was by myself, I tried to strike up an acquaintance with a couple ladies who were sitting in the restaurant. A couple farmers' wives was a mother and a daughter, and I was telling them about my trip across the prairie. And they said, you are genuinely excited about this, aren't you? And I said, well, yes, I've never seen it, except read about it in Little House on the Prairie, but I wanted to see it for myself. And they said, we tried to avoid that drive at all costs. And I said, well, I know why. I said, for hours, I didn't see a tree, I didn't see a cow, I didn't see anything except grass. I said, and then I came to a crossroads where they located a feed lot. Y'all, the smell would knock you back. It's like an Alabama game football locker room. I mean, oh my word. You'll let me have that because my house is blowing down in a hurricane. So they move that stuff around with bulldozers. I mean, huge piles of cow manure. And I said, what do you do with that? And she said, oh, well, that's money for a Nebraskan. That's the smell of money right there. She said, yeah, some of that's plowed back into the fields and we grow plenty of corn. She said, some of it is processed into methane gas and bottled for natural gas. She said, some of it we sell to you in South Carolina. It goes in big yellow bags called black cow and you put it as fertilizer on your garden. She said, there's plenty of money in cow manure. Of course, you're a professional storyteller, so you know that. With my hand up, that's exactly what she said to me. I learned a variety of culinary arts when I was in the West. So I did my week's worth of work in Omaha and came home, and I said to my wife, I said, wife, could I have one of those fringe jackets? Because I'm going to the National Storytelling Festival, and you know they expect me to look, well, fabulous. So, please, and she said, if you can get 3 schools to call you and book stories from the Great West, you may have that jacket. So, just like Aki, I started praying. Yes. And a school called and they said, do you have any stories about pioneers on the prairie? And I said, yes, there's one. Another school called and said, we're looking for Lewis and Clark. I said, they wore fringe. I've seen it in the encyclopedia. 2. The third school called, and I had a little moment of silence while the phone just continued to ring, and I picked it up, and I said, hello, this is storyteller Tim Lowry, specializing in stories of the Great American West. And they said, that's what we were calling for. And I said, all right. So I picked up the phone, and I called the Buffalo Bill History Museum and Gift Shop, and I said, I don't know if you remember me. She said, oh, yeah, honey, I got that wrapped up and it's already got your name on it. Boxed my jacket and sent it to South Carolina. I'm going to tell you a story from Texas. I've been there too, but if we talk about that, we won't get to the story. Bill Pickett was born a slave. Actually, I should say his daddy and mommy were born a slave. Bill was technically born free, but his mama said, you'll be a slave till you learn to read and write. Bill only wanted to be a cowboy. He lived on the Chisholm Trail, and every evening he'd sit on the fence and watch the cowboys drive cattle along the trail. He didn't think he needed to go to school to be a cowboy, but his mama said, you're going to school. So Bill faithfully went to school every day to learn reading and writing. But sometimes he would take a little detour as he walked to school. One morning he was on his way to school and he heard a ruckus over in the brambles off of the trail. And so he walked down a little path and he saw a calf, just a little tiny cow, running around. It had gotten away from the herd, was lost from its mama's, bawling, carrying on. And he saw a cowboy sitting off at some distance on a horse, and he stuck 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled real loud. And all of a sudden, out of the weeds came this little brindled dog. And the dog ran right over in front of that calf and jumped up and bit that calf right in the bottom lip, and then just eased that calf, led it by its bottom lip right back to the rest of the herd and on down the trail. Bill thought, don't see that every day. He went on to school. Another day when he was walking down the same road, he heard some cussing. Well, there ain't a boy in the world ain't going to go find out who's a cussing. So he went right down the same path, and this time it was about a half-grown cow, good bit bigger. And he saw some cowboys, and they had their lariats out, and they were flinging around. They were trying to put a rope around that cow's neck, and she kept dodging behind weeds and brambles and tree branches, and they couldn't get a good rope around her neck. And finally, Bill said, hey, I can catch that cow for you. Cowboys pushed their hats back on their head and said, you ain't got no rope. He said, I don't need one. You ain't got no horse. I don't need that neither. All right, fine, knock yourself out. Bill ran over there. Now, just a little kid, the cow wasn't the least bit afraid of him, so he ran right over there to that heifer and grabbed her by the ears and jerked her head up and bit that cow smack in the mouth. And as soon as he did, he said, all right, I got her. She ain't going nowhere. She ain't going nowhere. Come on, put her up around there. Put her up around. The Cowboys thought that was either the bravest or the stupidest boy they had ever seen in their life. But one way or another, he got their attention, and he decided that was going to be his specialty. When Bill Pickett grew up, he was going to ride the rodeo circuit, and he was going to make kissing cows or biting them smack in the kisser his specialty. By the time Bill was ready to ride, the West was pretty much won. And so he signed on with the 101 Wild West show out of Oklahoma, run by Joe and Zach Miller. They billed Bill as the Dusky Demon. And he had a great act. He would sit on a little spry quarter horse named Spradley. He would go charging into the arena, and they would turn a 1,000-pound steer loose. He would ride right up next to that bull, grab it by the horns, leap out of the saddle, pull its head up, bite it smack in the mouth, and then throw his hands up over his head and fall over and pull the bull down with him, and the band would play ta-da! He was traveling all over the United States, even made a European tour and rode for the Queen of England. And everybody was amazed to see the Dusky Demon. He was called Dusky Demon because in some locations, they didn't want a black cowboy to ride. But if they billed him as the Dusky Demon, somehow that made it okay. Bill said he got good treatment with the 101 ranch show. A cowboy is a cowboy, and he slept where all the other cowboys slept and ate what the other cowboys ate, and he had a very good life. But his wife worried about him. She said, Bill, you could get killed. I have dreams. A bull could step on you and smash your chest in, not to mention what might happen with one of those big long horns. In my visions, I see a black coffin with your name on the side of it. Bill, I don't want you to do this anymore. And so finally, Bill retired. He was working horses and cattle at his own ranch in Oklahoma, and the Miller brothers took their show down to Mexico. Well, the Mexicans were not very impressed with the 101 Wild West show. Mexicans had cowboys. Mexicans had bronco busting. Mexicans had their own Indian tribes. They weren't seeing anything special. Well, one night, Joe and Zach were in a Mexican cantina and probably had one too many Mexican beers, and they started bragging about this fella they knew called the Dusky Demon. They said, you Mexicans got them matadors, you know, and they press around their little pajama pants and toro, that ain't nothing. We got us a fella back in Oklahoma. He'd take one of your fighting bulls and bite it smack in the mouth. Well, that was an insult. Every country is famous for something. The Germans are famous for great athletes. The English are famous for great orators. And the Mexicans were famous for their bullfighters. And that was a point of national pride. And so finally, they laid down 5,000 pesos in a bet that this man could not even hold a Mexican fighting bull for 5 minutes. He didn't have to kiss it in the mouth. If he could even hang on to it for 5 minutes, they would pay up. And then Joe Miller went out to a telegraph office and sent a telegraph to his friend Bill back in Oklahoma, begging him to come out of retirement and bring Spradley on the train down to Mexico City for a bullfight. And his wife said, please don't do it. And he said, whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen. Kind of like boarding your house up and leaving it for a hurricane, coming to the National Storytelling Festival. So he put Spradley on a horse, and they headed to Mexico City. The bullfight would take place on December the 23rd, 2 days before Christmas Day. The Mexicans were going to watch the birth of the baby Jesus and the death of a Negro cowboy named Bill Pickett. They knew exactly what would happen. They had seen it many times before. On the day of the great bullfight, the Mexican Bull Arena in Mexico City was crowded with 25,000 fans, standing room only. There was supposed to be a full 2-hour show with bronco busting and all kinds of different acts, and they kept screaming and yelling all of that down until finally the Miller brothers said, Bill, we're going to put you on. We're afraid somebody might get killed if we don't put on the feature act right away. Bill said he was ready. He climbed up on Spradley, and they turned a Mexican fighting bull loose in the arena. And the whole crowd as one started to chant, Friole Chiquita, Friole Chiquita, which if you speak Spanish means little beans, little beans. That was the name of the bull. It had a bunch of black dots on its rump that looked like a bowl of black beans, and so they had named the bull Little Beans, but this bull was no joke. He had killed matadors, and they were going to watch him kill Bill Pickett. Just before they opened the gate to let Bill ride into the arena, he saw some young men across the way behind the wall. They lifted up a pasteboard coffin, and it had his name written across the side. He looked at Joe Miller and said, "If I get killed, you wouldn't leave my body here in Mexico for some coyote to scratch up my bones. You'd carry me back to Oklahoma, right?" Joe said, "You plan on getting killed?" "No man plans on getting killed. I'm just saying." Joe promised he would carry his remains back to Oklahoma. Bill nodded, and they opened the gate, and he rode in on Spradley. Now, Spradley was an excellent quarter horse, and usually he could get right alongside a bull, but this was not a clumsy 1,000-pound steer. This was a bull that was bred to kill. Hooves that would cut you to ribbons, horns that could stab you through. And every time Bill got close, that bull could turn on a dime. Finally, he realized the only way he was going to get hold of that bull was to sacrifice his horse. He held the horse still, and when the bull charged, it rammed horns right into the horse's flank. Bill later said that horse didn't so much whinny as it screamed. And Bill took that second to jump out of the saddle. When the bull extracted his horns, he curled his arms around the bull's head and tried to jerk it up to get a bite on it, but the bull went nuts. Pretty soon, Bill found himself banging literally head to head with a Mexican fighting bull, and he knew if he didn't get that thing stopped, it was going to crack his skull open. There was no way he was going to get a bite on it, but he didn't have to. He just had to hang on for 5 minutes, and the clock was already ticking. So Bill did the next best thing. He jerked his knees up and stuffed them in the bull's nose. He thought, maybe I can suffocate him and make him pass out. Apparently, Mexican bulls have never been told that you can breathe through your mouth. So he pulled up against the bull, and now there's this little black man all balled up on the front of this bull, and it's running around the arena and slamming him on the ground and whacking him up against the wall. And the Mexican people saw that the bull was beginning to stagger because it was indeed losing oxygen. And they went to fight for the bull. One man jumped up and hurled a seat cushion at Bill. That wasn't going to do anything. Another man pulled off his cowboy boot and flung it and hit Bill in the head. Finally, a man took a full bottle of beer and flung it like a football across the arena, and Bill heard something pop. It was not the glass breaking, it was 3 of his ribs. And the searing pain soared through his body, and it caused him to slip off those bloody horns, and he fell to the ground, and the crowd went silent. This was the moment they were waiting for. The bull backed up several paces, threw dirt up over its head with a front hoof, lowered its horns, and charged. Bill closed his eyes and gave his soul to God. And he felt the bull's belly brush right across his face. When he opened his eyes, somehow, it had to be a miracle, the bull had missed. You could see gore marks in the dirt on either side of Bill's body. Bill rolled out from behind the bull, climbed the safety wall, and pointed to a clock. He had not held on to that bull for 5 minutes. He had held it for 7.5. The man keeping time said he got so involved he forgot to ring the bell. Likely story. After things calmed down a bit, an old Mexican gentleman came to Bill and he said, "I can save your horse." And he sent a young lad to the store, and he came back with 2 red bananas. The old man peeled the bananas, and he pushed a banana down in each gore wound, and in 5 minutes, Spradley stood. A few minutes later, he was able to walk. And by the end of the day, Bill Pickett, with his 5,000 pesos reward, took Spradley back into a boxcar, and they headed north to the border under presidential military escort by the president of Mexico, because he was afraid what the Mexicans might do if they caught him traveling without a bodyguard. And then Bill retired. His wife, her fears were never realized, at least not with the bull. One day, he was out roping horses, not particularly dangerous, and a horse kicked, and Bill fell, and he was hit in the head, and he died from concussion about several days later. But everybody remembers Bill Pickett, and they remember his rodeo event. They're not cowboys brave enough now to bite a bull smack in the kisser. They just leap off and wrestle the steer to the ground, so we don't call it bulldogging anymore. Now we call it steer wrestling. And Bill was the first black cowboy admitted to the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and the rest is, as they say, history. Now, I thought we could have a little fun. All the great cowboys are named Bill. There's Bill Pickett and Buffalo Bill Cody and Wild Bill Hickok and Billy the Kid and, of course, the cowboy of them all, Pecos Bill. And several years ago, with some school kids, I recorded the great tall tale Pecos Bill, and we used a lot of live sound effects in the studio, and I thought it'd be fun to recreate the moment and do that now for your pleasure. And I thought maybe we'd get a cowgirl named Beth Horner and a cowboy named Aki Togan up here to help me with the sound effects. Please welcome my sound effects crew to the stage. All right. Just right over there. Stand behind that stool.
Okay, but we don't have any fringe.
No fringe? Is that what you're wearing? Here you go.
Oh, no. Oh, what a joke.
Oh, there you go. Now. All right, Aki. It's as far as I'm going. It ain't that kind of show. You put that on. All right. We got to get ready. Here, now, in this story, there's a woman who flies up the moon, whacks her head on the moon, and it rattles her brain good. So this is for whacking and brain rattling. All right. And, in this story, there's a rattlesnake, and they wring his head off. So that's wringing the rattlesnake's head off. There's that. Yeah. You're going to need this.
Okay.
Let's see now what else I got in here. Oh, yeah, here's this. We'll come to that in a minute. Oh, here. Oh, of course there's horses. A la Monty Python. There you go. There's that. You know what this is? That's the sound of a good idea. So here you go. Oh, before we kill that rattlesnake, we'll let him get a couple good jabs in. So there's that. Oh, sometimes the cowboys fight and you have to clunk their heads together. So that's the head clunking. Oh, I got this, like, I got spurs that jingle, jangle, jingle. So, there you go. There's that. Of course, we're going to cook a pot of chili. Come and get it. There's that.
Does anybody remember what these are?
Oh, pots and pans banging around. That's pots and pans banging around. Oh, I bet you know what this is for. No, it ain't for putting your dog poop in when you walk your dog. Outlaws! Like that, yeah. I never thought I'd live to be so old that I had to take paper bags to school and teach children how to bust a paper bag.
Oh, you brought an extra.
Yes, all right. Are you ready? There's only one other thing you need to know.
Yeah.
Dolly Parton is watching and I love her, so don't mess this up. Listen up, you varmints. I'm going to learn you about Pecos Bill, the rootinest, tootinest, outlaw shootinest cowboy that ever lived. Now, you might be wondering how Bill got his start. Well, I'm here to tell you. Bill was one of 17 brothers and sisters born to his mama on the banks of the Mississippi River. She was a real tough woman. She whooped 45 Indians with a broom handle and went on to wean her baby on moonshine, whiskey, and red liquor. One day, Bill's daddy came home. He said, "We're moving away from here. There's another family that's moved into a house about 50 miles downriver, and I don't like people jammed up against my backyard like a gall-darn subdivision. We're going to head out west where people got room to spread out." So they threw all 17 of them youngins in the wagon and took off. You could hear them horses a-clip-clopping on the road, and you could hear them harnesses a-jingle-jangling. And you could hear them kids in the back of that wagon a-hollering and yelling. All the boys were yelling, "Are we there yet?" That's for y'all. And all the girls were yelling, "I gotta go to the bathroom." And the mamas and the daddies were yelling, "Hush up!" Well, with all that hushing up, you couldn't hear yourself think. And all of a sudden they hit a bump and little old Bill fell out the back of the wagon and landed with a plop in the middle of the road, and they drove off to California and left him. When they got to California, the mama took all the kids out of the wagon. She counted their eyeballs, divided by two, realized she was missing one. She said, Well, look at there. We lost little Bill. I reckon he fell out somewhere in Texas. That's too far to go back and get him. He had to fend for his own self. So Bill was taken in by the coyotes, and they taught him how to hunt, and they taught him how to howl. Give me one good howl. So Bill was fine. He lived good. One day he caught him a buffalo and tore its hind leg off, and since there wasn't nobody to cook it for him, he just sat down and started to eat it. This cowboy rode by. You could hear that cowboy's horse's hooves clip-clopping on the road. That cowboy pulled his horse up short and said, whoa. He looked at Bill on the ground. He said, what are you doing rolling around on the ground naked like a varmint? Bill said, I am a varmint. I'm a coyote. He said, what makes you think you're a coyote? He said, I got fleas and I howl. That don't prove nothing. Everybody in Texas has got fleas and most of us howl. Look behind you. Do you got a fuzzy tail? Bick looked behind him. He didn't have no fuzzy tail, just a naked bum like every other kid. He said, that proves you're a human being. Now go into town and get some clothes on. So Bill went and got some boots and some breeches and a shirt, big 10-gallon hat, decided he'd become a cowboy. Well, he heard over in New Mexico there's fellers that's so mean they bit railroad spikes in half just for the fun of it. That sounded like good friends, so Bill started walking, and a rattlesnake slid out in the road and tried to bite him. You could hear that thing rattling around. Yeah, the red rattlesnake. There you go, right there. And he let it get in 4 or 5 good jabs, and then he wrung its head right off. No, he didn't dance the waltz with it. He wrung its head off. There you go. He'd know what to do if I could make this rhyme. Well, Bill thought he'd use that snake for a rattlesnake rope. Walked on down the road and a wildcat jumped in. Give me a wildcat screech. Lord of mercy. All the UK Wildcat fans are sitting right over there. He wrapped that snake right around that cat's head and jumped on that cat and rode it like a bucking bronco into an outlaw's camp. The outlaws had just cooked a big pot of chili and they rung the triangle and yelled out, come and get it. Old Bill did. He grabbed up a pot of chili and glugged it down, wiped his mouth with a prickly pear cactus and said, who's the boss around here? This big old mountain of a feller said, I was, but now you are. And that's how Bill became king of the cowboys. He had him a big old white horse that he rode named Lightning. Nobody else could ride that horse. If you was to get on that horse's back, it'd be explosive experience because he fed it nitroglycerin and dynamite. But Bill was lonely. Every night he'd go up on a high mountain, look up at the moon and howl. Give me one lone, mournful howl. Bill needed him a wife. Well, one day he is walking down the banks of the river, and down the stream comes Slewfoot Sue riding on the back of a 500-pound catfish. She is waving to folks on the bank. Bill took one look at that wild woman, fell madly in love, threw himself down on one knee, and he said, Sue, I love you. Will you marry me? She said, oh, Pecos Bill, king of the cowboys, of course I'll marry you. Let me go home and get my wedding dress on. She went and got her wedding dress. It was one of them big hoop jobs. Went around like that, had a bustle on the behind, made her hind end go, woo, woo, woo. She sashayed in the church house, stood up next to Bill. The preacher man said, do you? Bill said, I do. He said, do you? She said, of course I do. And then the preacher said, kiss, because now you're husband and wife. Y'all want to do that? Don't do that. Little kids hate that part. And then Bill turned to his wife and he said, now, Sue, I married you because I need me a good cook. Go in the house and cook me a pot of chili. And Sue stomped her foot and she said, I don't cook. I'm a liberated woman. I ride catfish and vote Democrat and things like that. He said, no, you're going to cook me a pot of chili. She said, fine. She went in the house. She grabbed up pots and pans. She started banging them pots and pans and fussing, carrying on. And all of a sudden, she got her a good idea. She run and got a bottle of wolf poison, poured it in Bill's chili bowl. Usually it's whiskey, but when you're in public school, you have to say wolf poison. And she poured it into Bill's chili bowl. When he ate up that wolf poison, it made him drunk and he conked out. You can talk about being drunk on wolf poison in public school, just not whiskey. And there's nothing better than to take this water bottle to kindergarten and go like this and watch the principal go. Sue went out to the barn while her husband was sleeping it off, and she jumped up on that big white horse, and she took off riding down the road. Yee-haw! a sudden that horse hit a big old bump, and Sue flew up in the air, way up through the clouds, and whacked her head on the moon. Rattled her brain good, and down she come. Fortunately, she was wearing that big behind bustle, and it bounced her back up in the air, and she whacked her head on the moon again. There she was, bouncing twixt heaven and earth. Bill woke up with a snort. Give me one big snort. Now, there you go. Don't ask for a Kleenex the rest of the day. He come running out. He said, Sue, I got to get you down from there. He called the preacher to pray for her, and the preacher said, we pray for our dear sister, Slewfoot Sue, that you would lead, guide, and direct her as she bounces twixt heaven and earth. Didn't do no good. She bounced for 3 whole days, didn't even stop to eat nothing. Finally, Bill said, Sue, I don't know what else to do. I'm afraid if you don't come down, you're going to starve to death. You know I love you. He pulled out a 6-shooter that looked a lot like a brown paper bag, blowed it up big, and shot once. Well, that was the...
Give us a workshop on how to do that.
That was the end of the marriage. Bill got married again, and again,
He's not going to do it.
and again, 3 or 4 times after that. He never loved any woman as good as he loved Slewfoot Sue, and then Bill died. People say he put barbed wire in his whiskey and it rusted his innards. That ain't what killed Bill. He's walking down the streets of Laredo one day. Big old bus from New York City pulled up, and this feller stepped off the bus. He's wearing white breeches, had a rhinestone vest with them rocks a-glittering all over it, and a big pink cowboy hat. And Bill said, who in the world are you? And he said, I reckon I'm a cowboy. And Bill fell on the ground and laughed himself to death.